I was halfway through reheating leftover pasta when my phone lit up. A call, not a text. That alone was strange. Nobody called anymore, at least not the people I knew. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and glanced at the screen. Adam. We hadn't spoken properly in months. Just the usual memes, a few random songs we'd send each other, maybe a "you still alive," every now and then. But we'd been tight once, through high school, through those messy early years when life felt like it had all the time in the world. Now he was in Tennessee, starting something new. I was still in Columbus, detailing cars for a living and keeping to myself. I answered. Yo. His voice was raw, like it had already been through too much. Bro, can you do me a huge favor? Yeah. Of course. What's going on? It's my mom. That's all it took. The air in my kitchen shifted. The microwave beeped behind me, unnoticed. She called me about 10 minutes ago. Crying. Like, full-on hysterical. I couldn't make out half of what she was saying, and now she won't pick up. I've been calling over and over. My mind jumped ahead. Is she home? Yeah, I think so. She sounded like she was. Adam was silent for a second, then added, almost pleading, Nate, I can't get there. I'm hours away. You're like 20 minutes. Please. I was already moving. I'm going. Right now. Thank you. I grabbed my hoodie, keys, and was out the door before I had time to think about what I was walking into. The drive was quiet, but not the kind of peaceful quiet you notice. It was thick, crawling. Like the night itself was holding its breath. The highway lights blurred past, but I wasn't looking at them. I kept thinking about Diane. Adam's mom was always composed. That's the word that stuck. She wasn't overly warm or cold. She was steady. The kind of woman who made you wipe your feet before entering, who had matching mugs for every season. I hadn't seen her in over a year. Life had done what it does, spread people out, pulled us into our own little orbits. Now she was crying on the phone, unreachable. When I turned onto their street, the houses were dim and still, like a neighborhood that had gone to bed early. Except hers. The porch light was on, casting a pool of yellow on the gravel path. I pulled up slowly, engine low, headlights cutting through the quiet. I sat for a moment with the car running, gripping the steering wheel without knowing why. Something about the stillness felt wrong. I turned off the ignition and stepped out. My shoes crunched softly as I made my way up the path. I expected her to be inside, behind a locked door, maybe curled on the couch. But she wasn't. She was on the porch swing. Barefoot. Wearing pajama pants and an oversized t-shirt that hung off one shoulder. Her knees were pulled to her chest, arms wrapped around them like she was holding herself together. Her face was streaked. Puffy eyes, red-rimmed, hair unbrushed and falling in loose strands. She looked small. Not in size, but in spirit. Like something had hollowed her out. Diane? I said softly. She flinched at my voice, looked up. For a second, confusion clouded her face. Then recognition. Nate, she whispered. Her voice cracked on my name. Adam called me. He was worried. I came to check on you. She didn't respond. Just looked away, wiped her face too hard, like she wanted the evidence gone. Then, slowly, she stood. Her balance shifted slightly, like she wasn't used to standing anymore. Can I come in? A small nod. No words. She opened the door, and I followed her inside. The house smelled the same, lavender and something faintly lemon, but it was too quiet. No TV murmuring in the background, no music, no soft clatter from the kitchen. Just stillness. And grief, hanging in the air like smoke after a fire. We sat in the living room, but didn't speak. She clutched a pillow to her chest like it might break apart without her hands holding it there. I waited. Then, barely audible, he laughed. Her voice was flat. Numb. Packed his things. Just laughed. Said he met someone younger. Prettier. That he didn't want to waste his life anymore. I didn't interrupt. After 12 years, she said, voice cracking, he just left. She looked away, out the window, and it hit me that there wasn't anything I could say that wouldn't sound small. Useless. I thought we were okay, she added. Not perfect. But okay. And now I just feel like nothing. The room was silent again. But this time, it felt like something inside it was holding its breath. She turned back to me. Her eyes were glassy, exhausted. And then, barely more than a breath. Take me anywhere. I blinked. What? Anywhere, she said again. I can't be here. Not tonight. She didn't mean forever. I saw that. She just wanted out of the walls that remembered too much. I stood. Okay, I said. Let's go. She nodded, grabbed a sweater, and followed me out the door. I hadn't seen her in a year. But somehow, tonight, I felt like I never really knew her at all. The car was quiet. Not just because we weren't talking, but because the silence between us felt full, like if either of us said the wrong thing, the moment would collapse. Diane sat with her knees pulled up again, sweater draped loosely over her frame. Her hair was still a mess, but it didn't matter. Nothing about her felt composed anymore, and somehow, that made everything feel more real. I didn't know where we were going. I don't think she did either. That wasn't the point. The point was motion, any motion, as long as it wasn't backward. I took the main road out of her neighborhood and just drove east, letting the streetlights slip past one by one. She didn't speak, and I didn't try to fill the space. Every now and then I glanced over just to make sure she was still with me, not physically, but emotionally, mentally. She stared out the window, her reflection barely visible in the dark glass, eyes far away. We ended up at an overlook near Hoover Reservoir. It wasn't a place I thought of often, but I remembered once pulling over there years ago after a bad day. Something about open water and a quiet horizon made it feel okay to not have answers. When I parked, the engine clicked softly as it cooled, and I looked over at her. You want to step out for a bit? She didn't answer right away, then gave a small nod. She pushed open the door, slipped out barefoot, gravel pressing into her feet. I followed. The air was cool, the kind that settles in after the sun disappears but before the night turns sharp. The lake was still, a sheet of quiet gray under the sky. She walked to the railing and leaned on it, palms down, head bowed slightly. We didn't say anything for a while. Eventually, she spoke, almost too quiet to hear. We came here once. I looked at her, but didn't interrupt. After a fight. Years ago. He brought me here to say sorry. Told me he wanted to start over. Said all the right things. I believed him. She exhaled, a long, steady breath, like she'd been holding it since we left the house. I gave him everything. Time. Forgiveness. All the little pieces you give someone when you think it'll make them stay. She turned toward me, eyes still glistening but less shaky than before. You know what hurts the most, she said. I shook my head. He didn't cry. Not a single tear. Just walked out like I never mattered. Like I was a story he'd finished reading. She wasn't looking for comfort. Not yet. Maybe not at all. I didn't reach for her. I didn't move. I just let her words hang in the air, carried by the stillness around us. I must have asked myself 100 times, she continued, what I did wrong. What I missed. But the truth is, I stopped asking for what I needed a long time ago. I kept making myself smaller so he'd stay. There was a long pause. She looked back out at the water. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. I think I disappeared before he even left. The wind moved slightly, brushing her hair back from her face. It wasn't dramatic. It was gentle. Like the night was listening. I stepped a little closer, not enough to crowd her, just enough to let her know I was there. You mattered, I said. She turned toward me. For the first time since we left the house, her eyes met mine fully. Not in passing. Not out of politeness. Really met. Do I? She asked. There was something so fragile in her voice, it caught in my chest. I wanted to answer right away, to say yes, of course, loudly and without hesitation. But the words caught on something. I looked at her. Really looked. And I didn't say anything. She turned away again, not angry, not disappointed, just tired. Why are you here, Nate? She asked. I hesitated. Because Adam asked me to check on you. That's not what I meant. She didn't press further. She just stood there, shoulders slightly hunched, staring at a lake that wasn't offering any answers. I'm sorry, she said, after a beat. I'm all over the place. No need to be sorry, I replied. You're allowed to be. She laughed once. Not a joyful laugh. More like disbelief wrapped in exhaustion. Allowed. That's a funny word. I spent so many years asking for permission to feel anything at all. The moment stretched. She didn't cry again. She didn't fall apart. She just stood quietly, letting the weight settle instead of resisting it. Then, barely above the breeze, she said, "Thank you for coming." I nodded. That was enough. She didn't need me to fix anything. She just needed to not be alone. We stood there a while longer, saying nothing. Just letting the air move around us, and the night hold what we couldn't. He walked out like I was a story he'd finished reading. We didn't plan anything. There wasn't a discussion or a destination. After the reservoir, we just walked back to the car like it was the only thing left to do. She slid into the passenger seat and pulled her knees back up, sweater wrapped tight around her like armor. I started the engine and we pulled away, headlights casting two soft beams into the quiet road ahead. Neither of us said much. It wasn't uncomfortable. It just was. The kind of silence that feels like a blanket instead of a wall. I kept my eyes on the road, hands loose on the wheel, but my mind wandered. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do, or even what I was doing. All I knew was that she needed space, and I could give her that. After 20 minutes of driving without a single word between us, I pulled into a modest roadside inn not far from the lake. I'd passed it before, never stopped. It wasn't anything special. A single-story building with wooden siding, a few porch lights, and a vending machine humming in the corner. But it looked quiet. And warm. I turned to her. Do you want to stop here for the night? She didn't answer right away. Then she looked at me, eyes tired but not closed off. She nodded. Inside, the receptionist didn't ask questions. We got a room with 2 beds and a window that faced the lake. The air inside smelled faintly of pine wood and old linen. Familiar, in a way I hadn't realized I missed. Diane sat on the bed closest to the window and stared outside. Her fingers touched the edge of the curtain but didn't move it. I'll order us something, I said. Burgers okay? She nodded again, not looking away from the glass. I used one of the local apps and found a nearby diner still open. 20 minutes later, someone knocked and handed me a brown paper bag. Fries, 2 burgers, 2 bottles of water. She barely touched hers. Just picked at the bun and pushed the lettuce aside like it gave her something to do. I didn't press. You want to talk? I asked. Or just rest? She leaned back against the headboard, arms folded loosely. Talk, maybe tomorrow. Tonight, I just want the noise in my head to stop. Then rest, I said. I'll be right here. She pulled the blanket over her legs and settled into the pillow. I turned off the overhead light, leaving only the small lamp by the nightstand. The glow was soft, just enough to see her silhouette against the sheets. I lay down on the other bed, still in my jeans, shoes kicked off but hoodie on. I didn't feel tired, but I knew I wouldn't be leaving that room tonight. The room was still. No TV, no outside traffic, just the faint ticking of something mechanical, maybe the heater, maybe the clock I couldn't see. Every now and then I could hear her breathing, slow and steady. Not quite peaceful, but no longer sharp with emotion. Right before I drifted off, I heard her voice. Soft. Almost like it had slipped out before she could stop it. Thank you for not leaving. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't want to, but because words would have broken the stillness. And somehow, the silence said more. When I woke up the next morning, rain was tapping against the window, light, rhythmic, almost musical. The kind of rain that makes you want to stay under the covers just a little longer. Diane was already awake. She was sitting at the edge of her bed, back to me, hair pulled into a loose bun. She'd changed into jeans and a long-sleeved shirt. Her posture was quiet, but not slumped. There was something new in how she sat. Morning, I said, rubbing the sleep from my face. She turned her head slightly, a faint smile tugging at her lips. You snore. I laughed. You sure it wasn't the fridge? Nope. Definitely you. I stretched, back cracking in protest. How are you feeling? She stood and walked to the window, resting her hand on the sill. Still like crap. But maybe a little less than yesterday. I nodded. That's something. There was a long pause. She didn't say anything else, and I didn't fill the space. We just let the rain speak for us. Eventually, we packed up. It was just past 10. I asked if she wanted to grab breakfast or head back. She looked at the house key in her hand, then at me. Not yet. I can't go back there yet. I nodded. All right. So where to? She shrugged, eyes on the road ahead. Let's just drive. So we did. We didn't turn on the radio. The windshield wipers moved in steady rhythm, the world outside blurred by streaks of water. It wasn't heavy rain, just enough to keep everything soft and slow. And for the first time in a long time, doing nothing felt like doing enough. You snore. We drove for hours without a plan. No GPS, no music, just the sound of the rain and the hum of the tires against wet pavement. Diane leaned against the window, her fingers occasionally brushing the glass like she was trying to feel the world outside without fully touching it. At one point, she cracked the window open and let the air in, cool and damp. She didn't say anything, but I saw the way she let the breeze find her. Like she was letting the weight lift, even just a little. Eventually, we pulled off the highway for gas. I filled the tank while she went inside. She came back with 2 coffees and a small bag of trail mix. For the road, she said simply, and handed me a cup. It was still hot. I nodded and took a sip. Black, no sugar. It fit the day. The rain slowed to a drizzle as we kept driving. Sometime after noon, signs for Hocking Hill started to appear along the roadside. I hadn't planned to stop there, but my hands turned the wheel anyway. It felt right, or at least right enough. We parked at the edge of a trailhead, nothing fancy. Just a dirt path tucked into trees still wet from the rain. Diane didn't hesitate. She got out, zipped up her sweater, and started walking. I followed. The trail was quiet. Leaves glistened with leftover rain, the ground soft and uneven beneath our steps. We didn't talk much, and we didn't need to. There was something about the silence between us now that felt fuller than it had before. Not heavy, just settled. After a while, the trail opened into a small clearing that looked out over a wide stretch of valley. Trees in every shade of green stretched to the horizon. Fog curled between them like slow-moving breath. Diane walked to the railing and stood there for a long moment. I didn't interrupt. I sat on a wooden bench a few feet away and waited. She eventually spoke, voice quiet and steady. I haven't felt like myself in years. I looked up at her, but she kept her eyes on the view. Her hands were resting on the railing, fingers relaxed. I think I got used to disappearing. At first it was just small things. I stopped singing in the shower because he said it gave him a headache. I stopped wearing my favorite dress because he made a joke about it once. She paused, shifting her weight slightly. And then one day, I realized I hadn't heard my own laugh in months. I was still there, cooking, cleaning, working, but I wasn't really there. I was just fading. I didn't try to interrupt with a comforting line. I knew better than that now. Some things just needed to be said out loud without response. I thought if I became easier, less emotional, less needy, he'd stay. I thought love was about being enough for someone else. But it turns out, I was slowly teaching myself how to disappear. She turned to me then. Her eyes didn't look broken this time. They looked awake. I was invisible for so long, Nate. I didn't even notice when I stopped existing. That hit something in me I wasn't ready for. I looked away, out at the valley, trying to let the air settle it for me. She sat down beside me on the bench. Close, but not touching. You ever feel like that? She asked. I nodded slowly. Yeah. Not the same way, maybe. But, yeah. She leaned back, arms crossed over her chest, pulling her sweater tighter. There were moments, she said softly, where I'd catch my reflection and not recognize it. Like I was watching someone else live a version of my life. One I didn't choose. We sat there for a long time, saying nothing. Just watching the trees breathe in the wind. Every now and then a bird would dart through the mist, too fast to follow. The air smelled like wet bark and earth. It grounded you, even if you weren't trying to be grounded. Diane let out a breath, slow and full. I don't want to be that version of myself anymore. She didn't look at me when she said it, and I didn't answer. I just let her words settle in the space between us. We started walking again after a while, back the way we came. The rain had stopped, but everything was still damp. Our shoes picked up mud, our jackets held the chill. But something in both of us felt lighter. Before we reached the car, she looked over her shoulder and said, almost like an afterthought, "Thank you for not filling the silence. I needed it." I smiled, just a little. Not every kind of love needs words. Some of it just needs to be witnessed. The lodge we found that evening was small, tucked away off a quiet two-lane road, surrounded by tall trees and the kind of silence that settles deep. Pinewood walls, heavy quilts, a small stone fireplace. It felt like a place forgotten by time. Diane didn't say much as we checked in, and I didn't push. We both seemed to move slower now, like every step carried the weight of something unspoken. Our room had 2 beds, soft lighting, and a window that looked out onto the woods. As soon as we stepped inside, Diane dropped her bag gently on the floor and walked straight to the window. She stood there for a long time, arms crossed, watching the trees sway in the fading light. I sat on the edge of my bed and let her have the moment. I used to dream about places like this, she said, voice barely above a whisper. Quiet. Warm. Somewhere I could just stop pretending. She turned around slowly, her expression softer than it had been all day. "Is that what this is?" she asked. "A dream?" I didn't answer. Instead, I picked up the old landline on the nightstand and called a local diner down the road. Fried chicken, mashed potatoes, and a couple slices of pie. Comfort food, simple and solid. When it arrived, we ate sitting cross-legged on our beds, passing napkins and quietly smiling through bites. There wasn't much conversation, and I think we both liked it that way. The fire crackled gently in the corner, casting flickering shadows across the room. After dinner, she reached into her purse and pulled out a small deck of cards. "I used to play this with Adam when he was little," she said, handing me half the deck. "Go fish?" I smiled and nodded. "You're on." We played 3 games. She won 2. Somewhere in the middle of the third, I caught her watching me. Not in a searching way, but like she'd just remembered something she hadn't thought about in a while. "What?" I asked, half grinning. She looked down for a second, then back up. "You're kind," she said. "And patient." I didn't realize how much I missed that. I didn't know what to say. I just held her gaze and let the words land where they needed to. She shifted on the bed, pulled her knees up slightly, arms resting loosely around them. "You make me feel like I'm still a woman," she added, this time softer. "Not just someone's leftover." That line sat between us for a long time. It didn't feel dramatic. It felt honest. I stood up and walked over to the window. She followed a moment later, and we stood side by side looking out into the dark. The woods outside were still, wet from the day's rain, and somehow glowing under the moonlight. "I don't know what this is," she said after a while. "I don't want to ruin it by trying to name it." "You don't have to," I replied. "It's enough just being here." She nodded, then turned toward me slowly. There was no hesitation in her eyes, but no rush either. Just closeness, unfolding in its own time. When she leaned in, the kiss wasn't urgent. It wasn't about passion or fixing something. It was about recognizing the hurt in someone else and offering warmth without condition. Later that night, we ended up in the same bed. Not tangled, not rushed. Just side by side, under one blanket, like 2 people learning how to breathe again. Her head rested gently on my chest, and her fingers traced soft, slow circles on my arm. I kept one hand resting on her back, steady, as if that alone might anchor the moment. We didn't talk about tomorrow. We didn't talk about the past. It wasn't about building something or escaping something else. It was just this. As her breathing slowed and the fire dimmed to soft embers, she whispered, "Thank you for reminding me what it feels like to be alive." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I just pulled the blanket a little higher around her shoulders and let the night hold us. There was peace in the quiet, the kind that only finds you when you stop trying so hard to be okay. And in that stillness, I realized something I hadn't said out loud. She didn't need to be saved. She just needed someone to stay. The next morning came softly. No alarms, no urgency. Just a dim room with heavy curtains and the muffled sound of birds outside. I woke before she did, still wrapped in the warmth of the night before, not just in body but in something deeper. She lay beside me, curled under the quilt, hair tousled, one hand resting near her face. She looked peaceful in a way that felt earned. I didn't move. I just stayed there, listening to the rhythm of her breath. For a while, it felt like time had stepped back. Like we were in a place untouched by everything waiting for us outside. No phones, no decisions, no questions we didn't want to answer. Eventually, I slipped out of bed and stepped outside onto the wooden deck. The air was cold and crisp. The kind that wakes you up slow, from the inside out. The woods were still, a soft mist hanging low between the trees. I stood there with my hands in my pockets, breathing in something I hadn't felt in a while. Stillness that didn't feel empty. She came out a few minutes later, wrapped in a blanket, holding 2 steaming mugs of coffee. One for her, one for me. "You disappeared," she said, her voice still scratchy with sleep. "Didn't want to wake you." She handed me the mug and leaned on the railing beside me. I forgot what silence like this felt like. I nodded. "It's nice." She took a sip and looked out over the woods. "It's strange. I feel like we've known each other forever, and at the same time, like this is the first time we've really met." "I get that." There was a long pause. Not uncomfortable. Just careful. Then she turned to me. "Do you regret last night?" I didn't look away. "No. Not even a little." She smiled, not the tired, practiced kind I'd seen before, but something gentler. "Real." "Me neither." We ended up staying one more day. Not because we had plans. We didn't. But neither of us was ready to step back into the noise. So we let the day stretch. We walked through the woods, followed small trails, talked about things that didn't matter. Childhood stories. Bad first dates. Old songs we still loved. It felt like peeling off layers we'd been carrying too long. At one point, we found a small waterfall. The rocks were slick and mossy, and the water was freezing, but Diane rolled up her jeans, kicked off her shoes, and stepped in without hesitation. "You're insane," I said. She turned and splashed me. "Come in, coward." I did. Just long enough to lose feeling in my toes. We stumbled back to the edge, laughing, dripping wet. She laid back on a flat stone and closed her eyes, face tilted toward the sun. "I feel 25 again," she said. "Or maybe just not 45. "You don't look 45, I replied, without thinking. She opened one eye and gave me a look. "Careful. You're making it easy to fall for you." We both laughed, but after the sound faded, we didn't speak. It was one of those moments where time feels like it pauses just long enough to let you notice it. We were barefoot, still damp, sun-warmed and weightless. And for a little while, there was no history, no hurt. Just presence. Later, back at the lodge, we ordered dinner from a diner down the road. Fried chicken again, mashed potatoes, 2 slices of pie. We ate in bed with a movie playing, but I don't remember what the movie was. I just remember her shoulder pressed against mine, her laughter at something I missed, our hands brushing now and then like they were checking in. When the credits rolled, she looked at me. "You make me feel like I matter again." "You do," I said. "You always did." She hesitated, like she was weighing something she hadn't said yet. "I don't want this to be a fantasy," she whispered. "I don't want to pretend we're something we're not. But I also don't want to let go of this just because it's complicated." "I'm not asking for forever," I said. "I just want to be here with you. However long this lasts." She leaned in and kissed me slow, sure, grounded. That night was different from the first. It wasn't about comfort. It wasn't about pain. It was about choosing each other, fully aware of the edges. We stayed up late, talking in low voices, her fingers tracing mine like she was memorizing something fragile. At one point, she rested her forehead against mine and whispered, "I needed this more than I knew." Not the sex. The being wanted. The being held. "You deserve that every day," I said. She closed her eyes and let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. I forgot what it feels like to be a woman. Not a wife. Not a mother. Just, a woman. I didn't answer. I just pulled her closer, and let her fall asleep in the quiet. We stayed 2 more days. Not because we had anything left to say, but because neither of us wanted to say goodbye yet. There was no real conversation about it. We just woke up, made coffee, wandered outside, and let the hours find their own shape. Some afternoons we talked, other times we just sat side by side, not needing anything but the presence of each other. There was peace in that. And also something unspoken underneath, like both of us knew the end was coming, but weren't ready to invite it in yet. On the last morning, she woke up before me. I opened my eyes to the sound of her moving around the room, folding clothes with care, tucking socks into the corners of her suitcase. She didn't look rushed. Just thoughtful. I sat up, rubbed my face, and watched her for a moment. She looked different. Not just rested, different. "You okay?" I asked. She smiled softly, then nodded. "Yeah. I think I am." She stood by the mirror longer than necessary, fixing her earrings, smoothing her shirt, then just looking at herself. Like she was still getting reacquainted. "I look different," she said quietly. "You do. Happier?" I nodded. "Lighter." She kept looking at her reflection for another second, then turned away. We checked out just after 10. The woman at the front desk gave us a look, the kind people give when they think they understand something private. Neither of us said a word. The drive back was slow. Not because of traffic, just because everything felt a little heavier now. The spell was wearing off. Trees blurred past, and the closer we got to her neighborhood, the quieter it all became. Diane stared out the window, arms folded across her chest, but not in the closed-off way from before. More like she was preparing herself. When we pulled up in front of her house, she didn't move right away. She just sat there, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the porch like it belonged to someone else. "I don't want to go inside yet," she said. "We can sit here," I told her. "As long as you need." She nodded but stayed quiet. A minute passed. Then another. Finally, she reached for her seatbelt, unlatched it, and opened the door. Her feet hit the gravel with a small crunch. "I need to face it," she said. "I have to." I got out, walked around to her side. "Come in with me?" Of course. The house hadn't changed. Same porch light, same welcome mat, same silence when we walked through the door. But the air inside felt different. Less dense. Like something had cracked open and let in a little light. She moved slowly through the living room, fingers brushing over the couch cushion, the picture frames on the shelf. She looked back at me, then exhaled. "I've been thinking," she said. "About everything." "Yeah. I can't pretend this wasn't real. I don't want to. But I also know we can't stretch this into something it's not." I nodded. "I know. You helped me feel alive again. Wanted. Human. And I don't have the words to thank you for that." "You don't have to." She stepped closer, eyes clear, steady. "It's not about owing. It's about honesty. I needed you. And you showed up. You stayed. You gave me something beautiful." I felt my chest tighten, but I didn't look away. She reached out and took my hand, held it for a long moment. "This will stay with me," she whispered. "All of it. Every minute." "Me too." She pulled me into a hug. It was warm and quiet and final. When she pulled back, she kissed me on the cheek. "I'm going to be okay now." I believed her. I walked to the door and paused for a second, just long enough to look back. She stood in the center of the living room, arms crossed gently, smiling just a little. I drove home slow. The roads looked the same, but something in me had shifted. Not in a tragic way. Not in a lost way. Just different. Like I'd lived something real and rare, and now I had to let it go. The next day, Adam texted. Just one line. "Thanks for going over. She said you really helped." I didn't respond. I didn't know how to say everything that had happened in a single reply. A week later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Just a small folded note inside. You reminded me I'm still a woman. That I still have time. That love, even if brief, is worth feeling. Thank you, always. D. I folded the note and placed it in the back of my drawer. We haven't spoken since. And that's okay. What we had wasn't meant to last forever. But it still mattered.